The quiet professional. The early morning calm at Peak Fitness Center shattered with the rhythmic thud of weights and the steady hum of treadmills. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, dawn painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Among the handful of dedicated early birds, Jasmine Rodriguez moved with quiet precision, her movements economical and focused. At 32, Jasmine carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from experience rather than ego. Her athletic frame, honed through years of military service and consistent training, reflected dedication rather than vanity. As a former Marine Force recon operator, she learned that true strength lay in discipline, not display. Today marked her 6th month as a regular at Peak Fitness. In civilian life, she built a successful career as a cybersecurity consultant, but the gym remained her sanctuary, a place where the structured routine helped quiet the memories of her deployment days. Here, each rep, each set, served as meditation, a way to maintain both physical and mental discipline. The morning crowd knew Jasmine by sight, if not by name. She was the woman who never failed to wipe down equipment, who kept to herself, but always offered a silent nod of acknowledgement to fellow regulars. Some noticed the small Marine Corps tattoo on her forearm, but few knew the weight of experience it represented. As she moved through her warm-up routine, Rita Chin, the young receptionist, watched from behind the front desk. Rita had always admired how Jasmine carried herself, professional, focused, and somehow both approachable and distant at the same time. Unlike many regulars who treated the gym as a social club, Jasmine treated it like what it was, a place for work. The peaceful atmosphere shifted when Marcus Bennett pushed through the front doors. At 40, Marcus had appointed himself the gym's unofficial expert, though his expertise seemed to consist mainly of unsolicited advice and thinly veiled condescension. He strutted past the front desk without his usual attempt to flirt with Rita, his attention caught by something else, or rather, someone else. Jasmine had just begun her first working set at the squat rack, her form perfect, her breathing controlled. Marcus watched, his expression darkening with each smooth repetition. Here was someone who hadn't sought his approval, who hadn't acknowledged his self-proclaimed authority over the weight room. "Your stance is all wrong," Marcus announced, loud enough to draw attention from nearby machines. "You're going to hurt yourself lifting like that." Jasmine completed her rep with the same steady control, racked the weight, and turned to face him. Her expression remained neutral, but those who knew what to look for might have noticed the slight shift in her stance, a subtle readiness that came from years of assessing potential threats. "I appreciate the concern," she replied, her voice calm and measured, "but I'm comfortable with my form." She turned back to the rack, clearly considering the conversation finished. Marcus wasn't used to being dismissed. He stepped closer, entering the space Jasmine had carefully maintained between herself and others. "Listen, I've been lifting for 20 years. I know what I'm talking about. Women especially need to be careful with compound movements." The air in the gym grew thick with tension. Rita gripped her phone under the desk, uncertain whether to call the owner. A few regular members slowed their workouts, watching the interaction with growing concern. Jasmine paused, then turned to face Marcus fully. Her eyes met his, not with challenge but with a steady, assessing gaze that had once evaluated threats in far more dangerous situations. "Sir," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that needed no volume for emphasis, "I've been training for longer than you might think. Please respect my space." The words were polite, but the message was clear. A boundary had been drawn. Marcus stood there, mouth slightly open, caught between his wounded pride and the unexpected steel in Jasmine's voice. For a moment, the only sounds were the whir of treadmills and the distant thump of music from the group fitness room. Then Marcus stepped back, his face flushed. "Whatever," he muttered, but his eyes held a spark of something dangerous, wounded pride mixing with anger. As he stalked away, those nearby could sense that this wasn't over. This was merely the opening move in what would become a much more significant confrontation. Jasmine watched him go, her expression unchanged. She'd seen his type before, in the Marines, and in civilian life. Men whose sense of self-worth depended on dominance, who couldn't handle any challenge to their assumed authority. She returned to her workout, but her awareness remained heightened, a skill honed through years of service that had never quite switched off. Rita let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. In just a few minutes, the dynamic of the entire gym had shifted. The morning regulars exchanged glances, reading the situation with varying degrees of concern. They'd all seen Marcus's behavior before, but this was different. For the first time, someone had stood their ground. As the sun rose higher, casting bright rectangles of light across the gym floor, Jasmine continued her workout with the same focused precision. But beneath her calm exterior, she was processing, planning, preparing, just as she'd been trained to do. She knew from experience that men like Marcus rarely backed down after being challenged. The real test would come later, and when it did, she would be ready. Rising tensions. The next week at Peak Fitness Center unfolded like a slowly tightening spring. Marcus Bennett's wounded pride festered, transforming into something darker with each passing day. He began arriving earlier, deliberately timing his workouts to coincide with Jasmine's regular schedule. His presence became a shadow, hovering at the edges of her carefully maintained routine. At first, his tactics were subtle. He would loudly coach nearby gym members, his voice carrying across the weight room with exaggerated authority, throwing pointed glances in Jasmine's direction. When she moved to use equipment, he would suddenly need it for his own workout, standing too close, taking too long, watching her with barely concealed resentment. Jasmine noted every movement, every attempt at intimidation. With the same analytical mindset that had kept her alive during her Marine Force recon days, she adjusted her positioning in the gym to maintain clear sightlines and escape routes. Habits ingrained through years of training that now served a different purpose. Her workouts remained focused, her form impeccable, but her situational awareness never wavered. Rita Chen watched from the front desk with growing concern. She'd seen Marcus's behavior with other women before, but this was different. There was an intensity to his fixation that made her uncomfortable. During her morning shift handover with David Turner, the gym owner, she finally voiced her concerns. "David, I think we need to talk about Marcus," Rita said, her voice low as she glanced around the lobby. "The way he's been acting around Jasmine, it's getting weird." David ran a hand through his graying hair, his expression troubled. At 45, he'd spent most of his adult life in the fitness industry, building Peak Fitness from the ground up. He prided himself on running a professional establishment, but confronting paying members was always delicate. Has she complained? No, Rita admitted, but you know how some people are. They don't want to make waves. And Jasmine, she's different. She handles herself, but that seems to make him even more angry. David watched as Marcus deliberately crossed Jasmine's path for the third time that morning, his bulk taking up more space than necessary. Jasmine simply adjusted her route without breaking stride, her face composed but her eyes tracking every movement. The tension in the air was palpable. Other gym members had started to notice too. The morning regulars exchanged worried glances whenever Marcus entered, his presence now a reliable source of discomfort. Some had begun timing their workouts to avoid him altogether. A few of the more conscientious members had tried engaging him in conversation when his behavior became too obvious, attempting to distract him, but their efforts only seemed to fuel his obsession. The situation came to a head on a quiet Thursday morning. Jasmine was setting up for deadlifts, methodically adding plates to the bar, when Marcus's voice cut through her concentration. "You're loading that bar all wrong," he announced, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "But I guess that's what happens when you think you know everything." His voice dripped with condensation, but there was something else there now, an edge of genuine hatred. Jasmine straightened slowly, turning to face him. The gym had grown quieter, the usual background noise of clanking weights and wearing machines seeming to fade away. "Marcus," she said, her voice level but firm. "This needs to stop." He stepped closer, using his height to loom over her. "Or what? You think you're special because you can lift a few weights? Because you've got everyone here fooled?" His voice had dropped to a near growl, meant for her ears alone. "You're nothing. Just another woman who doesn't know her place." The threat in his words was unmistakable, but Jasmine didn't flinch. Her eyes met his with the same steady gaze that had faced down far more dangerous adversaries. "This is your last warning," she said quietly. "Back off." For a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a glimmer of self-preservation. But then his face hardened, and he stepped even closer. "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll run to management. File a complaint. Face it, you're out of your depth here." Rita had already picked up the phone, her finger hovering over David's number in the contacts. Around the gym, several members had stopped pretending to work out, watching the confrontation with growing alarm. The atmosphere was charged with potential energy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Jasmine remained still, but her stance had shifted subtly, weight balanced, hands relaxed but ready. She'd seen that look in men's eyes before, knew exactly where this was heading. This wasn't just about gym etiquette anymore. This was a man whose entire sense of self was crumbling, and there was nothing more dangerous than wounded pride backed into a corner. "Think carefully about your next move," she advised, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "Some lessons are harder to learn than others." Marcus's face contorted with rage. The last threads of his self-control were visibly fraying, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The morning sun streaming through the windows cast harsh shadows across his face, deepening the lines of anger etched there. The gym held its collective breath, waiting to see which way this powder keg would explode. Rita's hand tightened on the phone. David emerged from his office, drawn by the unusual quiet. And Jasmine stood her ground, ready for whatever came next, knowing that sometimes the only way forward was through the storm. Breaking point. The breaking point came with the suddenness of a summer storm. Marcus's control finally snapped, his face contorting with rage as he lunged forward, reaching for Jasmine's shoulder. Time seemed to slow, the gym's usual cacophony fading to a distant hum as Jasmine's training took over. In one fluid motion, she stepped offline, pivoting away from his grasp. Marcus's momentum carried him forward, his balance compromised by his own aggression. Before he could recover, Jasmine had already moved, her years of Marine Force recon training transforming thought into action with practiced precision. She caught his extended arm at the wrist and elbow, using his own forward motion to direct him past her. The technique was simple, efficient, and controlled, designed to neutralize rather than harm. Marcus found himself stumbling, his considerable bulk working against him as he struggled to regain his balance. "What the?" he started to say, but his words cut off as Jasmine smoothly transitioned her grip, maintaining control while keeping a safe distance. The move brought him to his knees, his arm held in a firm but measured control hold that prevented further aggression without causing injury. Around them, the gym erupted into chaos. Rita was already on the phone, her voice steady despite her shaking hands as she called David from his office. Several members had pulled out their phones, recording the incident. Others stood frozen, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and amazement. "Stay down," Jasmine commanded, her voice calm but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed in crisis situations. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will maintain this hold until you can control yourself." Marcus struggled briefly, his face reddening with a mixture of pain and humiliation. But each movement only made the hold more secure, his own resistance working against him. For the first time, real fear crept into his eyes as he realized just how completely he had misread the situation. David burst out of his office, taking in the scene with a mix of alarm and professional concern. "What's happening here?" he demanded, though the answer was clear enough from the positions of those involved. "Your employee assaulted me," Marcus gasped, though his position on the floor rather undermined his claim. Jasmine maintained the hold with the same steady pressure, neither increasing nor decreasing the control despite his accusation. "That's not what happened," several voices called out at once. A young man stepped forward, his phone still recording. "He went after her. She just defended herself. I got it all on video." Rita had come around from behind the desk, her phone also raised. "I have it too," she added, her voice stronger now. "He's been harassing her for weeks. We all saw it." Jasmine remained focused on controlling the situation, her breathing steady and controlled. "Mr. Turner," she addressed David formally, "I'd prefer not to press charges, but this needs to be addressed. I can maintain this hold as long as necessary without causing injury, but I suggest we discuss how to move forward." David nodded, years of gym management experience kicking in as he assessed the situation. "Marcus, your membership is revoked, effective immediately. If you can behave yourself, we'll let you walk out of here. If not, we'll have the police escort you out. Your choice." The fight seemed to drain out of Marcus all at once. His shoulders slumped, and the resistance in his arm melted away. Jasmine, reading his body language with practiced ease, began to slowly release the hold, ready to reestablish it if necessary. But Marcus remained on his knees, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. As Jasmine stepped back, maintaining a safe distance, Marcus struggled to his feet. His face was a mask of humiliation and defeat, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his movements stiff and unsteady. The gym remained silent as Marcus gathered his belongings from his locker, all eyes following his progress. No one approached him or spoke to him. When he finally pushed through the front doors, there was an almost audible release of tension in the room. Jasmine stood quietly, her posture relaxed but alert, watching until Marcus's car pulled out of the parking lot. Only then did she allow herself to fully stand down, though her eyes remained sharp and observant. David approached her, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "I owe you an apology," he began. "We should have addressed this situation sooner. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "This isn't my first time dealing with someone who couldn't handle their own insecurities. I just hope he learns something from this." Rita stepped forward, still clutching her phone. "That was amazing," she breathed. "Where did you learn to do that?" A small smile touched Jasmine's lips. "Marine Force Recon teaches you a lot more than just how to fight. It teaches you when to fight, how much force to use, and most importantly, how to control a situation without causing unnecessary harm." The other gym members began to gather around, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. The incident had lasted less than a minute, but it had fundamentally changed the atmosphere of the gym. In those brief moments, they had witnessed not just a physical confrontation, but a lesson in true strength, the kind that comes with control, discipline, and the wisdom to know how to use it. Lessons learned. The days following the incident brought subtle but significant changes to Peak Fitness Center. The morning after Marcus's departure, David called an emergency staff meeting before opening hours. The early sun cast long shadows through the windows as he addressed his team, with Jasmine present at his request. "Yesterday's incident was unfortunate," David began, his expression serious as he looked at each staff member. "But it's also an opportunity. We need to do better at identifying and addressing problematic behavior before it escalates." Rita sat with her notebook open, taking detailed notes. The video she'd recorded had been sent to the gym's legal team, along with statements from several members who witnessed the confrontation. But more importantly, she'd begun drafting new protocols for handling harassment complaints. Jasmine stood quietly near the wall, her presence requested not just as the person involved in the incident, but as someone whose experience could help shape new policies. When David asked her to speak, she stepped forward with the same quiet confidence she brought to everything. "The most important thing to understand," she explained, "is that situations like yesterday don't happen in isolation. There are always warning signs, patterns of behavior that escalate over time. The key is recognizing these patterns early and having clear procedures in place to address them. Throughout the day, members who had witnessed the incident returned to the gym, many approaching Jasmine with a new respect. But what struck her most was how the conversation had shifted. Instead of focusing on the physical confrontation, people wanted to understand the principles behind her response. "You could have really hurt him," one young woman observed during a water break. "But you didn't. Why?" Jasmine considered the question carefully. "In the Marines, we learned that true strength isn't about causing harm. It's about having the control not to, even when you could. The goal is to end the threat while minimizing damage. It's about protection, not punishment." Word of the incident spread throughout the gym community. By the end of the week, David had implemented new harassment policies, with clear guidelines for both staff and members. Rita took on the role of safety coordinator, her desk now equipped with an emergency protocol manual and direct lines to security. But perhaps the most significant change was in the gym's atmosphere itself. Members began looking out for each other more actively. The regular morning crowd, who had witnessed the confrontation firsthand, developed an unspoken understanding, a shared commitment to maintaining the respectful environment that Jasmine had defended. One morning, about 2 weeks after the incident, Rita caught Jasmine as she was finishing her workout. "You've changed things here," she said, her voice confident in a way it hadn't been before. "Not just with Marcus, but how people think about strength and respect." Jasmine wiped down her equipment, taking time to consider her response. "Change happens when people realize they have a choice," she replied. What happened with Marcus wasn't about physical strength. It was about standing up to bullying and harassment. Sometimes it takes one person to show others it's possible. The conversation was interrupted by David, who approached with an unusual request. Several members had asked about self-defense classes, not just for physical techniques, but for the kind of situational awareness and control Jasmine had demonstrated. "We're not asking you to become an instructor," David clarified quickly, "but would you consider consulting, helping us develop a program that teaches both the physical and mental aspects of self-defense?" Jasmine looked around the gym, taking in the morning crowd. She saw Rita's eager expression, the interested glances from nearby members, and the genuine commitment to change in David's eyes. Her time in the Marines had taught her that leadership sometimes meant stepping up when others needed guidance. "I'll help," she agreed, "but on one condition. We focus on prevention and awareness first, physical techniques second. Real self-defense starts long before any physical confrontation." The impact of this decision rippled through the gym community. Members who had previously felt vulnerable began standing taller, moving through the gym with more confidence. The morning regulars, who had witnessed Jasmine's composed handling of Marcus, started embodying similar principles of respect and awareness in their own behavior. Even the physical space seemed to reflect the change. David rearranged some equipment to create better sightlines and added more mirrors, not for vanity, but for awareness. The front desk was repositioned to give Rita and other staff better visibility of the entire gym floor. But perhaps the most profound change was in how people interacted with each other. The gym had always been a place for physical transformation, but now it was becoming a space for personal growth as well. Members began to understand that true strength wasn't just about lifting heavier weights or running faster. It was about carrying oneself with dignity and treating others with respect. New beginnings. 3 months after the incident with Marcus, Peak Fitness Center had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. The physical space remained familiar. The same equipment, the same morning light streaming through the windows, but the energy within its walls had shifted dramatically. Jasmine's influence extended far beyond that single morning of confrontation. The self-defense awareness program she helped develop had become a cornerstone of the gym's identity. Twice a week, she arrived early to lead sessions that blended physical techniques with mental preparation and situational awareness. "Remember," she would tell her students, a diverse group that included both Rita and several morning regulars, "the goal isn't to win fights. It's to prevent them from happening in the first place. Awareness and confidence are your first line of defense. The lessons went beyond physical techniques. Jasmine shared principles she'd learned in the Marines, the importance of carrying oneself with quiet confidence, of being aware without being paranoid, of understanding the difference between aggression and strength. Her students learned to read body language, to recognize potential threats, and most importantly, to carry themselves with dignity. Rita had blossomed in her role as safety coordinator. The once shy receptionist now moved through the gym with confidence, her presence both welcoming and watchful. She developed an intuitive sense for potential problems and had prevented several situations from escalating through early intervention. "You know what's different?" Rita mentioned to Jasmine one morning as they watched the sunrise through the gym's windows. "People aren't just working out anymore. They're building something together. A community." She was right. The morning crowd had developed an unspoken code of conduct. Members looked out for each other, offered spots when needed, and maintained an atmosphere of mutual respect. The cliques and territorial behavior that had once defined certain areas of the gym had dissolved, replaced by a shared understanding that everyone deserved to feel safe and respected. David had noticed the change too. Membership numbers were up, particularly among women and older adults who might have felt intimidated in traditional gym environments. The incident with Marcus, rather than damaging the gym's reputation, had become a catalyst for positive change. One morning, as Jasmine finished demonstrating a technique to her class, a new member approached her. The woman was hesitant, clearly uncomfortable in the gym environment, but something had drawn her to watch the session. "I saw the video," she admitted quietly. "The one of you handling that guy. I've been going to gyms for years, always feeling like I didn't belong. But seeing how you handled that situation, it made me realize I don't have to accept feeling intimidated." Jasmine nodded, understanding the weight of the woman's words. "The gym should be a place of growth," she replied, "not just physically, but in how we see ourselves. Strength isn't about dominance. It's about lifting others up while standing firm in your own worth." The woman joined their next session and soon became a regular member of the morning crowd. Her story wasn't unique. Word had spread about Peak Fitness, not just as a place to work out, but as a community where respect and personal growth were as important as physical training. Even the physical training itself had evolved. Members began to approach their workouts differently, focusing less on ego and more on form and function. The mirror-gazing and showboating that had once been common had given way to mindful, purposeful training. 1 year after the incident, David organized a special morning session to celebrate the gym's transformation. As members gathered in the pre-dawn hours, he spoke about the journey they'd all taken together. "What happened here wasn't just about one incident," he said, looking around at the familiar faces. "It was about choosing what kind of community we wanted to be. Every day, we make that choice again, to respect each other, to look out for one another, to embody the kind of strength that builds up rather than tears down." Jasmine stood at the back of the group, her presence as steady and grounding as ever. She thought about her years in the Marines, about all the different kinds of strength she'd encountered. But here, in this transformed space, she'd found something special. A community that understood that true power wasn't about domination or control, but about creating spaces where everyone could grow stronger together. As the sun rose over another morning at Peak Fitness, the gym hummed with energy. Not just the sound of weights and machines, but the quiet strength of people supporting each other, challenging themselves, and growing together. The incident with Marcus had long since faded into gym lore, but its lessons remained. That real strength comes in many forms, that respect must be both given and earned, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stand firm in our principles while helping others find their own strength. Rita, watching the morning crowd from her desk, smiled as she saw new members being welcomed into the community they'd built. The gym had become more than just a place to work out. It was a testament to what people could achieve when they chose to stand together against bullying and disrespect, creating a space where everyone could feel strong, safe, and supported.